So they really went out, built Lewis Powell, who became Supreme Court Justice, wrote a memo to them saying, here's what we ought to do. Form some think tanks, buy some radio stations, train some people to be broadcasters, get some talking points around, get some ideas around, and they really did build that network, which liberals have never done. Still to this day, haven't done.
Except with Air America was a little bit different. Now, that was a network.
Yeah.
It did have funding. It had investors.
My point is that you can name Air America, which went bankrupt twice and no longer exists, as like the only example through all those years. Now, for the last 4 years, there are about half a dozen, maybe as many as 8, nationally syndicated progressive talk show hosts. You know, I'm one. Stephanie Miller, Ed Schultz, Tom Hartman, Randy Rhodes, Mike Malloy. I'm running out. Ron Reagan used to be.
Sort of.
He's no longer because he was Air America.
Right.
But there are that few, and there are that few stations.
And Rachel Maddow was, right?
And Rachel Maddow was.
Now she's TV.
So there's this huge imbalance. There's one other factor, too, which is, let's talk about the fairness doctrine. You know, first of all, I remember the fairness doctrine. It wasn't that onerous, I don't think. What the fairness doctrine, I think, is based on a pretty solid principle. And I'm not calling for bringing back the fairness doctrine. I wouldn't be opposed to it necessarily, but in the book, you noticed, that's not my mission, right? But what it said was, these are public airwaves, okay? And if the public owns the airwaves, then the people who run them should serve the public interest. I would argue you're not serving the public interest when, as you pointed out, 53% of Americans didn't vote for John McCain, and those 53% of Americans, by this 9-to-1 ratio, aren't really served by talk radio.
Okay, now that's a fair point.
So the fairness doctrine just said, if you have a radio station, you just have to provide a balance of views that would reflect the general public. So it can't all be all left-wing or all right-wing. And the fairness doctrine was done away with, as you know, and the FCC doesn't enforce the public interest thing at all today. So we're stuck with this imbalance.
Okay, but then if you look at television, it's the completely opposite direction. You see conservative talk and conservative shows as the minority. You've got Fox News, and that's pretty much it. You don't see, I mean, MSNBC is very liberal, so is CNN. As CNN headlines, I mean, there's a very different dichotomy when we talk about television. So then if you bring in the fairness doctrine, you kind of have to envelop everybody, television and radio, right?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I say you can't just say, let's bring back the fairness doctrine. Because when the fairness doctrine was adopted, like in the 50s, there was this is black and white television we're talking about, right? I mean, you might as well bring back black and white television. So much has changed. You've got cable TV, you still got the networks, you have a gazillion different television channels, and you've got the internet. And you got the blogs, and so how do you control all that? That's why I think it's time, if ever it was a time, it's gone. But I disagree with you on television. The way I see it, first of all, Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch, brilliant.
Absolutely.
They saw an opening from your business point of view. They created an unashamedly conservative network, and they put on great programming, and they stuck with their people. By the way, Bill O'Reilly, first couple of years, Bill O'Reilly couldn't get 3 viewers. And now look at him, right? Roger Ailes knew his people, and he stuck with them. MSNBC has decided if Roger can do that on the right, we can do it on the left. I just think CNN today is lost. I don't think CNN knows who it is or what it wants to be when it grows up. It's too bad.
And the fact that they had Lou Dobbs go in both directions didn't really identify anything either.
No. Right. Yeah. So I think television is sort of you can watch MSNBC on the left, you can watch Fox on the right, or you can watch CNN if you're really confused.
Okay, I'm going to bring back a question that you were saying earlier, or that you didn't quite answer, and that is, why do you think this has happened, that it wound up with 90%? Is it the ownership of radio that we have 90% conservative talk, or is this really what America wants to hear? I mean, certainly, you've got to have ratings to generate advertising, and that's the bottom line principle of all radio. So if this really was failing across the board, if Rush was out there great, and all of his minions that want to be him were not successful, they would not be on the air. So there is some kind of dynamic that is working for them on the air. You have to admit that, right?
Right. Well, first, let's go back to what I said when the FCC got rid of the fairness doctrine, right? Then stations did not have to provide any kind of balance, right? So Rush Limbaugh comes along, And he was so successful, so they wanted more people like Rush, and they said, hey, we can make all this money on the conservative side, and that's where they went. The people, there are 5 companies that own 95% of all talk radio stations in the country. Of those 5 companies, 3 of them have 0 progressive talk at all, talkers at all.
But looking at the failure of Air America, are you saying that, okay, well, I have this because I know it's going to be successful and generate advertising revenue for me? You know what? I've known Mel Karmazin to wall calls and bash programs that have been on his radio stations, but he always follows that up with, guess what? They make money, so that's why they're there. And every program director thinks that same way. And I don't believe...
Here's the problem. I can show you people and stations, right, and programs on the left that make money today. Madison, Wisconsin makes $1 gazillion. Portland, Oregon, same thing. Chicago, L.A., successful progressive talk radio station. But there are only 50 of them. And in other markets, there's no opening. I cannot get on the air in it. I'm not complaining here. I didn't come here to whine. All I'm telling you is there's no opportunity for me as a liberal talker in Miami, in Atlanta, in Boston, in Philadelphia. And the reason is, you use that word, ownership. Because the people who own the stations are of these 5 big companies, and they will not, except for 2 of them, to a certain extent, allow any progressive on the air. My argument is, if you give us an equal shot, you level the playing field, just one progressive station in each of these markets, we'll hold our own, if not beat the conservative talkers. I
throw the challenge gauntlet down only because of looking at Air America. I thought they had high names. They had Janine Garofalo there. I mean, they had real big high rollers, and it didn't work. I don't know. But
we will spend, those of us on the left, the rest of our lives trying to explain the embarrassment of Air America. You're a business major. It was a lousy business plan, poorly executed. They started the network, right, with one person who had ever been on a microphone before. And that was not Al Franken. That was Randy Rhoads. All the rest of them were stand-up comics. They were funny, but they didn't know how to do radio. They said they had $30 million. They probably had 3.
And they sold it for $4.25 million. Just to put that into perspective, Rush is now under a contract for $400 million. So it is quite a disparity.
They gave all progressives a bad name. It was, it's like some restaurants make it and some don't, because one restaurant fails doesn't mean restaurant's a bad business.
This is true. Now, I have to ask you, what conservative do you like? You mentioned Laura Ingraham in your book as somebody you admired because of her experience, but then you kind of followed along.
I admired her because she has a dog.
And because she's a dog. No, but you did actually say she came to the table with a good background, but she did wind up falling in the path of Rush and kind of over-sensationalizing things. Who do you like in the realm of conservative world, if anybody?